Next case study is about house elf called Kreacher and what we call disgruntled intentional insider. So here we have the situation of conflict of loyalties. So Kreacher has been serving the family of Sirius Black for a very long time, and his family were serving the predecessors of Sirius Black, and there is magical bound. So technically, Kreacher must be loyal, but he is not loyal to Sirius because there is a conflict of ideology because Sirius is against Voldemort. And another thing is Kreacher is not treated as equal in this setup. So sometimes there can be individuals who work within an organization, but they might not be significant in terms of their role. They can be clears, they can be catering staff. It can be someone who is around, who listen to conversations, who can see documents, etc. But they are not treated as equals. So they have access, but not sufficient amount of how would I say, decision making, and often those people are overlooked.
Sorry, I'll just admit that person. This point about lack of belonging and unmanaged resentment is really strong, and I'm sure we've all experienced that person in the workplace that just does not connect, which doesn't mean they're going to be an insider threat, but the reality is it will fester over time, and if they don't have someone in the workplace to talk about it with, they can't really get any comfort outside of the workplace, because anyone they're talking to out there really will only know whatever they're told by the person. So it's important that people do have an ability to talk to others in the workplace, and that way they have a sense of belonging in a security culture sense. Very important outcome to achieve.
And Kreacher was feeling resentment from Sirius, so he didn't feel loved. He didn't feel that he is valued. And that was one of the moments when you see in the movie or in the book where there was a moment when Kreacher was very lonely when Sirius came back. If Sirius made an effort, things might have been different, but another side knew of the vulnerability of the Kreacher and they played on that. So let's watch a short extract. And here body language is talking for itself.
If my poor mistress knew the scum they let into her house, what would she say to old Kreacher? Oh, the shame.
So in terms of behavioral indicators, what we see with Kreacher, and I think with this video we saw it very clearly, there is visible resentment, bitterness and hostility towards Sirius Black, towards Harry, towards other members of the Order. Kreacher doesn't feel he belongs in that environment. He feels a bit lonely.
And that attachment, as we've got there about ideology and values, some people might think ideology is a bit of a strong term, but the reality is if someone in the workplace has no connection in terms of the purpose of the workplace and the values, the cultural values, what the organisation is trying to achieve and so on, we're not talking about people that are absolutely signed up, but if they have no real connection ideologically and with the values of the place, they are going to be a misfit, and they're not going to align, and their behaviour will either just not conform or align with what's required, or they'll become aberrant because they really don't care because they're not identifying with the workplace. So these concepts are relevant in every workplace.
Kreacher also shows signs of passive resistance because he's bound by magic, by what we call code of conduct, but he selectively choose what he follows in terms of compliance, and he tries to find the way out around instructions. So he already tried to invent the way to overcome the code of conduct or magical restrictions.
That point about signs of humiliation and alienation, I found through the decades where I've led people, I've been a manager and a leader of large workforces and so on. If you take someone's, I suppose, if you humiliate them, if you actually take their dignity, you attack that, then that disrespect runs very deep and may never be able to be corrected or amended or fixed or healed. So, you know, people who have been humiliated in the workplace, who feel they don't fit, that's a very large challenge to try and repair.
Then with Kreacher, he was lonely for years and he was protecting the household. He was looking after it. So for him, that was his core values. And when Sirius started to throw away some objects from the house, Kreacher was trying to find them and hide them. So this is where there was some secrecy and guarded behavior on his behalf, because he couldn't understand why Sirius destroying what was so important for Kreacher, which was his standard.
And this issue then about intentional withholding of critical information, certainly not the same as lying. And someone in this sort of mindset will say in retrospect, well, you never asked me. They would have known full well what they knew was relevant, even critical, but because of their, I suppose, disconnection or alienation with the organisation, if you didn't ask them the direct question, they'd have no problems with not telling you that piece of critical information which they know would be relevant.
And I think, Tim, to your point about the workforce and humiliation, or opposite, you can call respect to what they're doing. There are people who have been in their roles for decades and they're doing one thing, and for them, it is a driver. That's what they like to do. And if this part is disrespected, or if this part is not properly recognized and valued by organization, this is often where disgruntlement starts to come in. So if the Order of the Phoenix had an insider threat program, I think it's once going back to organizational culture, to inclusive culture where everyone feels respected, valued, and psychologically safe.
Behavioural monitoring becomes important, because if you don't see what's going on in the workplace or hear about it or whatever you like, if there's no cue to give you advice about a particular behaviour that's occurring in the workplace, then of course you're denied the opportunity to understand it potentially and then intervene. And go back to the comment I made before about early intervention saves the organisation and it saves the person. We come back to the real importance of monitoring so you can see what's going on. Contentious issue we can talk about later on in terms of perhaps open source intelligence or other monitoring mechanisms that are in place, but nonetheless it's very important.
Another thing is need to know principle, and this is where Order of the Phoenix, where with all their plans, with all of their discussions, with all of their secret or classified documents they were producing in the house, where Kreacher had full access to and had full access to those conversations, they ignored the person who wasn't aligned with this, with the same ideology as the Order of the Phoenix. They just didn't treat him as an equal and didn't make sure that he is not within vicinity when those conversations were happening. That's why it caused the death of Sirius Black, because Kreacher was able to share very important information about Harry Potter and Sirius Black strong bond with Voldemort, and he knew how to manipulate this information, though it wasn't classified, but it was something that Voldemort could manipulate.
And the last 2 points I'll wrap together in terms of leadership. Leadership's fundamental to this. If leadership does not occur in a constructive way, then you'll never have people that feel that they belong. And I connect that to the last point. Some of the best responses I've had over the years have been, as Marina said, people that have been in one role, relatively low level for a long time and so on. And they do become invisible, and they have a succession of bosses that only look at them at the work level, at the rank, whatever you want to call it, that they are, and don't think, oh, that really junior person. can't be of value, but they are. Otherwise, A, they shouldn't be in the workplace. But B, if you just show them a small amount of respect, and I don't mean in an artificial way, but like you would like to be shown yourself, so they don't feel invisible or undervalued just because they've now been asked for their opinion or to have their say or whatever, you will get an immensely positive response, and they will not become your insider threat.